Two sisters walked to a shopping mall to see an Easter display and never came home. For 38 years, the answer sat inside a folder no one reopened. The man who would fill that folder had walked into the police station himself. He gave the detectives a name, a car, a description. They checked his story, decided he was lying, and let him go. They were right that he lied. They were wrong about the rest. Sheila Lyon was 12 years old. Her sister Catherine, Kate to the family, was 10. They lived in Wheaton, Maryland, a quiet suburb just north of Washington, D.C., in a house full of children. There were 5 Lyon kids in all. Their father, John Lyon, was a voice the Capitol knew without ever seeing his face. He worked in radio at WMAL, the kind of steady, familiar man who talked to a whole city for a living and went home at night to a house in the suburbs. It was the week of Easter, 1975. School was out for spring break, and about half a mile from the Lyon house sat Wheaton Plaza, a shopping mall with a holiday display the neighborhood kids kept talking about. On the afternoon of March 25th, a Tuesday, Sheila and Kate asked to walk there. It was the kind of thing children did then without a second thought. A short walk down a familiar road in daylight to look at a display and buy some lunch. Their mother, Mary, told them to be home by 4. Their older brother, Jay, saw them at the plaza. They were eating pizza. A neighbor passed them on the way over and waved. Sheila wore glasses, gold, wire-rimmed. She was farsighted. That detail meant nothing on March 25th. They finished their pizza. They stepped out of the mall a little after 2 o'clock. And that is where the record of Sheila and Catherine Lyon, alive, simply ends. 4 o'clock came. The girls didn't. By the standards of 1975, that was not yet alarm. Children lost track of time. Mary waited and sent one of the older kids to look. By early evening, the waiting had turned into something else. John Lyon came home to a house that had gone wrong. They called the friends, they called the neighbors, they called the plaza. No one had seen the girls leave with anyone. No one had seen them leave at all. A little after 7 o'clock, John Lyon did the thing no parent ever rehearses. He picked up the phone and reported his 2 daughters missing. Montgomery County officers came to the house that night. At first, it was handled the way most of these calls resolve. 2 kids who wandered off, who would turn up embarrassed by curfew. Officers walked the route, they checked the mall, they checked with friends. Nothing. No sign of a struggle, no witness to a car, a grab, a scream. 2 girls had crossed half a mile of ordinary suburb in broad daylight and vanished somewhere between the mall doors and their own front steps. By morning, the tone had changed completely. Because by morning, the people in charge understood that whatever had happened to Sheila and Kate Lyon had happened in plain sight, and not one person had seen a thing. What followed became one of the largest investigations the Washington region had ever seen. Hundreds of officers, the FBI, thousands of tips. Over the months, investigators would chase more than 2,000 leads, and every one of them led nowhere that mattered. The Lyon home filled with reporters and detectives, and John Lyon, a man whose whole job was talking into a microphone, began going on the air to plead for his own daughters, speaking to the same city that was now searching for them. Witnesses at the plaza started coming forward with fragments. Several of them remembered a man, older, well-dressed, carrying a briefcase with a tape recorder, stopping children and seeming to record them. Some kids thought he worked for a radio station. Police built a composite sketch of him. The tape recorder man became the face of the case, printed in every paper. He was never identified. But there was a second sketch. Another witness, a young friend of the girls, described a completely different man. Younger, long hair, bad skin, shabbily dressed. He had been at the plaza that day, staring at the girls hard enough that she had told him off for it. That second sketch was drawn, and then it was set aside. The detective who made it doubted it, worried it would scatter the investigation across 1,000 false leads, and it was never shown to the public the way the tape recorder man was. It went into the file. It would sit in that file, almost unseen, for 38 years. And it was a near-perfect likeness of the man who took them. Here is the part that would take 4 decades to understand. 6 days after the girls vanished, on the 1st of April, 1975, a young man walked into the police on his own and said that he had seen something. His name was Lloyd Welch. He was 18 years old, a drifter who worked the traveling carnivals in and out of trouble. He told detectives he had been at Wheaton Plaza that day and that he had watched a man force the 2 girls into a car. A red Camaro, he said, with white interior. It was exactly the kind of break the investigation was desperate for. An eyewitness, a vehicle, a direct account of the abduction itself. So the detectives did what good detectives do. They tested it. They put Lloyd Welch on a polygraph. He failed it. Pressed on it, he admitted that parts of his story were not true. And to the detectives in 1975, the read was obvious. A carnival drifter circling a high-profile case, maybe chasing the reward money, feeding them a story that fell apart the moment a machine was hooked up to him. An unreliable witness. They thanked him and they sent him on his way. His statement was typed up, stamped, and filed. 18 years old. At the plaza, by his own account, on the day it happened. A liar who had walked in and inserted himself into the disappearance of 2 children. And not one detective in that room wrote down the question that wouldn't be asked for another 38 years. Not whether Lloyd Welch was telling the truth, why he was there at all. The case went cold. Not for a year, for a generation. Mary Lyon told people that by the end of that first summer, in her heart, she already knew her daughters were gone. John Lyon never stopped, but the leads dried up. The detectives who worked it retired or died. Wheaton Plaza was renovated. The world moved on from the 2 blonde girls on the missing posters, and the posters faded. But Montgomery County never formally closed it, and by 2013, the file had come down to 1 detective still carrying it, a cold case investigator named Chris Homrock. Homrock went back to the very beginning. He pulled the old boxes, and inside them he found that suppressed second sketch, the young man with the long hair and the bad skin that the public had never really seen. Then he found the 1975 statement of the carnival worker who had walked in claiming to be a witness, Lloyd Welch. And somewhere in the record was a mugshot of Welch, not from 1975, but from an arrest 2 years later in 1977. Homrock set the 1977 mugshot down next to the 1975 sketch the police had hidden away. It was the same face. The man the detectives had run off as a liar in 1975, the unreliable witness, the carnival drifter they had polygraphed and dismissed, was the same young man another witness had watched stalking the girls across that mall. For 38 years, the prime suspect in the Lyon case had been sitting inside their own evidence. In a statement he volunteered, with his own name on it. When they went looking for Lloyd Welch in 2013, they did not have to look hard. He was already in prison, in Delaware, serving time for sexually abusing a child. On the 16th of October 2013, 2 Montgomery County detectives, Dave Davis and Chris Homrock, sat down across a table from him. And before they had really started, Welch looked at them and said, "I know why you're here. You're here about those 2 missing kids." What followed was one of the longest interrogations in the history of the case. 21 months of it, across session after session, led by detectives including Davis, Mark Janney, and Katie Leggett. Welch talked, and that was the problem. He talked, and the story changed every single time. In one version, he only watched. In another, he was there, but someone else did it. He named his own relatives. He described a man taking one of the girls down into a basement. He moved the crime from Maryland to Virginia and back again. Detectives spent month after month trying to separate one thread of truth from a man who lied the way other people breathe. But buried inside all the shifting versions was something they could actually check, something concrete. Welch kept returning to one place, his family's land, a stretch of rural Virginia, hundreds of miles from Wheaton, up on a mountain. And he kept talking about a fire. The place was called Taylor's Mountain in Bedford County, Virginia, a rural property the Welch family had owned for years, more than 200 miles southwest of the mall the girls had walked to. And when investigators went looking for the people who had been on that mountain in the spring of 1975, the accounts they got back lined up. A relative told them Lloyd Welch had shown up that spring carrying duffel bags, heavy ones. They were stained and they smelled, one witness said, like death. Welch told them it was spoiled meat. A cousin said he had helped Welch burn 2 of those bags, each one 60 or 70 pounds, in a fire up on the mountain. A fire some of them remembered being kept burning for days. Neighbors recalled the smell and assumed someone was burning trash. In 2014 and 2015, the FBI's evidence teams went up Taylor's Mountain with shovels and screens. And they dug. They sifted that ground for the 2 girls who had left a shopping mall 40 years before. What they recovered was almost nothing. A few charred fragments of bone, a single tooth, a piece of melted wire that might once have been the frame of a pair of glasses, Sheila's glasses. It was not enough to identify anyone, because that had been the entire point of the fire. Whatever had been Sheila and Catherine Lyon had been reduced, deliberately, to something that could never be carried home. Lloyd Welch did not do this alone. That is the part the evidence keeps insisting on, and the part the case was never able to finish. In his shifting accounts, Welch implicated his own family. He described his uncle, Richard Welch, as part of what happened to the girls. He put his own father into the story. And when investigators examined the basement of a house tied to the family, they found something that stopped them: extensive traces of human blood. Too old, too degraded to pull a usable profile from. Welch's father had died in 1998, already beyond the reach of any charge. The uncle, Richard Welch, was named, investigated, implicated by Lloyd's own words. He was never charged. There was never quite enough to corroborate the word of a man who lied as easily as Lloyd Welch did. And so the question that the blood in that basement raised has never been answered. Who else was on that mountain? Who else was in the car? How many hands it actually took to make 2 children disappear so completely? Lloyd Welch knew. And Lloyd Welch had already shown the detectives exactly how much of the truth he was ever willing to give, which was only ever as much as he chose. On the 12th of September 2017, in a courtroom in Bedford County, Virginia, Lloyd Lee Welch Jr. pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Sheila and Catherine Lyon. He was sentenced to 48 years. John and Mary Lyon were in the room. 42 years after they told their daughters to be home by 4 o'clock, they sat and listened to the man responsible admit, at last, that the girls were never coming back. But even his guilty plea kept something back. Welch admitted to taking part in the abduction. He did not admit to the murders themselves. He handed the court the same thing he had handed the detectives for 21 months, a piece of it. Enough to close the case on paper, not enough to fill a grave that does not exist, because there is no grave. The bodies of Sheila and Catherine Lyon were never recovered. What the fire on Taylor's Mountain left behind was never enough to bring either girl home to be buried. The uncle was never charged. The full account of who did what that spring of 1975 went into the record unfinished. And the case has refused to stay closed. As recently as the fall of 2024, federal agents went back up Taylor's Mountain with a warrant, with shovels, and dug that ground again, almost 50 years on, still looking. Mary Lyon died in 2024. John Lyon died in June of 2025, 85 years old. Neither of them ever got to bury their daughters. Two girls walked half a mile to see an Easter display. The man who did it told the police where to look, and there was nothing left to find.